Hello, and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast series brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. I'm your host, Wini Fred Gurung, a research analyst at the Institute. In this episode, we turn our focus to the Maldives, a nation gearing up for its presidential elections on September 9, 2023, a crucial moment that will determine its future leadership. What sets this election apart is the remarkable number of candidates in the running, marking the highest count since the 2008 Maldivian presidential election. To speak on this and more, we have with us Dr. Rasheeda Didi, Senior Research Fellow for South Asia Focused Network Maldives, member of the Higher Education Council Maldives, and an independent academic and resource person. Welcome to our podcast, Dr. Didi.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk on the Maldives.
So the first question is, with 8 candidates in the running, this election has the largest candidate lineup in the country's history. So the big question is, who holds the advantage among these candidates? And what are the potential hurdles that the incumbent President Ibrahim Mohamed Solih might encounter during his re-election bid?
Okay, I sort of recognize 3 candidates having a great advantage. One is obviously the President Ibrahim Mohamed Solih. He completed many of the projects that affect the common citizen in rural Maldives, which would be the average citizen, and that would be installing electricity in many of the rural islands, drinking water systems, building harbors in some of the more difficult islands where the access to the islands was difficult, and then the sewage disposal systems, which were all, of course, programs and projects which had started during the first MDP, Maldives Democratic Party, party's reign. Well, we won't call it reign. Party's administration in 2008, beginning 2008. So I think this makes him a popular. He gets the vote from the rural areas for these completions of projects which affect the average citizen. And then his handling, a second point is his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, vaccination started very early in the country. Of course, we begged and borrowed and everything, but still the government started that. And in fact, today, there should not be anyone living in the country. Anyone living in the country means including the expatriate community as well, who could not get the 2 vaccine shots. If somebody didn't have it, it's because that person didn't do it, follow the rules, or was skeptical about the vaccination, which many people in the world were. So those were the reasons. And I think this people remember, coronavirus was dealt with in a more efficient way than most countries, particularly in this region. And then, of course, the geography helped, the geographical isolation of the communities with anybody affecting helped this. And tourism started. So economy revitalization of the economy started early. In July 15th, we opened up the border, which was earlier than any in the world, I think. So those things, people who think about these factors will remember. And so he has an advantage of that. Then I think the second person who has an advantage, second candidate, would be Mohamed Muiz. He has an advantage because he has had experience during the previous government of President Yamin. He was the Minister of Housing, and now he is the mayor of Male. So these posts had given him experience. He comes from the main opposition party. And another advantage is that all the people who supported President Yamin will vote for him. Almost all, let's say, will vote for him. So that's a big advantage for him. Then, of course, a third person who has an advantage would be the former President Mohammad Nasheed. He has an advantage because of his popularity with the public, particularly with the youth. Now, the Maldives Democratic Party, people associate with him, not with anybody else. So that's another issue that we will be handling, we will be talking about later. Okay, then the second part of the question, what are the potential hurdles for President Solih? The biggest hurdle, I think, is the splitting of his party, MDP, Maldives Democratic Party. As you know, that party is split into two, and one group, now former President Nasheed's faction is called the Democrats, and then President Solih's faction is called the MDP, Maldives Democratic Party. So the supporters of this particular party is now split into two. And Nasheed's side may have more than Solih's side of the original MDP. I think that would be a big obstacle, the biggest obstacle, in fact. Too many, and then the second obstacle would be too many opponents. Now, in the more recent so-called democratic Maldives, we see there's a culture of trying to remove the incumbent president. Now, everyone aligns when it comes to an election, aligns, and they work together to eliminate the incumbent president. And so that would be a major obstacle if almost everyone is aligned to cast him out of power. That's a huge, huge obstacle. And then a third thing that he's that he's facing is his association with India, too close to Indian government. According to people and complaints, too many Indians in the country and too many projects given to Indian companies, and the government is too lenient on Indian companies handling, and in some cases, apparently the government and Maldivians do not have access to some of the sites that have been held by the Indians for various reasons. For example, in Ardu, in Hitadu, they have a section given to them or loaned to them, and they are in charge of the security of that area. Now, Maldivians have to get permission to go into, even government officials, as I understand. So these are kinds of Indian-associated problems, obstacles that people keep on facing. And another issue is, it's a more recent issue, but this is not affecting the average citizen's views, because the average citizen does not know the details about this. And that one is government was too lenient towards Mauritius' claim on Chagos archipelago. Now, we lost territory, according to most news and so on. And the opposition argues that International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea ruled in favor of Maldives in the overlapping boundary issues, but we lost it. We were too lenient towards Mauritius and Caribbean. So I think those are the the issues that I would have time to talk about on this particular question. If you have any more, you can ask.
Yeah, so continuing on the split in the party, we witnessed a significant development when the former Maldivian President Mohamed Nasheed, who previously played a pivotal role in President Solih's election in 2018, now poses a challenge to him. So, how do you think Nasheed's decision to form a new party and field a candidate against Solih will influence the MDP's total vote share?
Well, first of all, MDP associates with President Nasheed, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. And so the split will affect both sides, obviously. Solih now is MDP's government, so along with Solih, MDP's government employees are with him, or pretends to be. So we would only know after the election how much but I would say the split will affect the government because most of the MDP, former MDP, original MDP voters will vote for President Nasheed. And those in the government, right now, of course, they would not side with President Nasheed, ex-President Nasheed, because of losing their job and other facilities, other aids, and so on. So we don't see that happening now. The way we see it, it's kind of equally split, but that may not happen at the election. That may not be the case at the election. And I think that most of the MDP people will vote for President Nasheed. But at the same time, there are some factors against President Nasheed that people had seen, which is he has been very aggressive as Speaker of the Parliament. And he had not been very, very fair in dealing with the Parliament members who are opposed to him. And so these will affect also, which means the parliamentarians of the Democratic MDP party are going to be split. As things stand, I think it is only like 10 out of the 60 something that had signed for 10 or 15 that had signed for the Democrats, that is Nasheed's party. But again, as I said, it may be revealed after the election. How many of well, we won't know exactly who voted for what, but when the numbers come, when the total numbers come, I think we would see that the parliamentarians also, actually a few of them voted for the government. Because right now the parliamentarians aren't going to lose their jobs, even if they openly declare their opposition towards President Solih, because they have been elected by the people. They do not have jobs given by the government. So that's how I see it. Split, of course, majority voting for President Nasheed, but some associated with President Solih may not be actually supporting President Solih, but of course, on the face, that's what they are pretending to be, or other people think they are. So that's my answer to that question.
So, bringing India and China in the picture, currently President Solih's administration has prioritized close ties with India, resulting in substantial support ranging from initial debt relief to pandemic aid and infrastructural development. Solih's India First was a shift from Yamin's policy of giving more priority and favor to China. And his tenure has also witnessed the entry of the US into the country. So, how might the election outcomes impact Maldives' dynamics with India, China, and the US?
Okay, India, China, and the US. Now, if President Solih or President Nasheed wins the elections, the dynamics will be as it is now. That is a super close relationship with India and a close relationship with the US, since the US has entered the scene and starting new projects and so on. But a distant, I wouldn't even say a distant, maybe in the horizon, but a cordial relationship with China, because the government always needs China's aid, and it comes in without much fuss, without too many rules, and strict monitoring policies, which always appeals to the government. And so I think China will, and also it will jump in. It's always filling in a vacuum, although people think it's aggressively coming in, but no, it's not aggressively coming in. We have, the country gives in, the governments have given in, be it in the Maldives or anywhere else in the world. I think that's how it is. Except in probably places like South China Sea, Taiwan, that's another case. But in South Asia, it comes in when nobody else is helping. So during the previous government, also with the bridge, with the famous bridge that the Chinese completed, the Sino-Maldives Friendship Bridge between the capital Male and the airport and the next island, Hurmale. They came in. It was open, and other people, nobody else wanted to do that. Now, there is a reason for the acceptance of the Chinese, as I see, in preference to other people. Also, the governments do that, particularly during the previous administration of President Yamin. As I said, the rules are, the finances are easily obtained. The rules about the use of finance is easy, lenient. The monitoring is not that strict. For example, if something is given to India or the EU and the other international financial institutions like IMF, World Bank, etc., they have many strict rules, which the Maldivian government finds it, or at that time at least, found it difficult to follow. And I think this gives way. I may be wrong, but I have a very strong feeling that strict monitoring of aid given to a country prevents somebody from pocketing, prevents from a corruptive government officials pocketing it themselves, which is, of course, attractive to many countries with corrupt leaders. And I think that's another thing that China was favored in preference to other people. And they came in, they are acting, as I see it, like the friend of the third world, the friend of the downtrodden, poor little country, the way during the Soviet Union days, Russia acted, friend of the third world. And so that's how things will be, as I see it. But if the opposition party, the People's Progress Party, wins the election, it will be a different case. It will be more back to, the policies will be sort of back to, maybe not as bad as at that time, back to Yamin's time, which means an exceptionally close relationship with China. At that time, even new laws were in place, enacted, bills were enacted to able China to get land for 99 years. So new laws were made. and many other things. People already in charge of, for example, the Indian company that was in charge of renovating or making the new airport, they were ousted, and that project was given to China. So these types of things occurred. Maybe not to that extent now if President Moise becomes the president, but exceptional relationship with China will stand. And again, I don't think Moise will alienate the other countries so much the way the previous government did, the previous PPM, People's Progress Party, did. We alienated the EU, alienated the Commonwealth. We left the Commonwealth, alienated, and then left many other countries, quit severed diplomatic relations with many countries that Maldives had diplomatic relations for a long time, like Qatar. So that's how I see that the dynamics affecting after the election. Back to you.
So, how might the election outcome impact the other evolving relationships between the Maldives and countries like Britain, Saudi Arabia, Sri Lanka, Australia, Bangladesh, Japan, and others?
I think except Saudi Arabia, the others will be the same. For example, if the People's PPM comes into power, it might get closer to Saudi Arabia because even during the previous government of the same party, we also, I mentioned just now a minute ago, we severed the relationship with Qatar. That was to please Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia might be a special ally of the PPM government. But other countries, I think it will be Seychelles, Saudi, Britain, Sri Lanka, Australia, Mauritius, Bangladesh, Japan, Seychelles. These will be same sort of, may not be as close to these countries, but so we'll have a cordial, kind, nice, close relationship, especially countries like Britain, Sri Lanka, and Mauritius. Mauritius, maybe we might have a problem with Mauritius because of this Chagos archipelago issue. We might restart that. Then Bangladesh, I think it's the same with every government. We have a cordial, kind South Asia, fellow South Asian country, fellow SAARC brother kind of relationship with Bangladesh. Japan, of course, the distant but aid-giving, helpful country, very nice, cordial relationship. And Seychelles. Seychelles politically is not such an important country for the Maldives, but we have cultural ties with it, in that its deputy prime minister is a half Maldivian, full Maldivian in his origin, then of course a citizen of the Seychelles, and fellow island country, island nation. Otherwise, it's pleasant, nice. Yes. Okay, back to you.
So finally, what are the key campaign issues being advocated by the contesting candidates this year? And has President Solih successfully fulfilled the commitments he made during his previous election bid?
He has fulfilled many of the projects, successfully made commitments. A lot of it, for example, as I mentioned before, harbors had been completed in many islands. electricity, provision of electric gauges had been installed. Sewage systems have been installed. Drainage systems have been installed, not sewage, sorry, drainage. But what he did not feel was the solving of the murders and disappearances. He promised this in his inauguration speech, if I recall, but nothing has been, and especially outstanding in this group of people who have disappeared or who have been assassinated is one of them. The topmost is the former member of parliament, Dr. Afrashim, who had been murdered. But of course, there are mysterious circumstances associated with it. Apparently the street camera was not on, then nobody knows, but people know who did that, yet nobody has been caught, nobody has been jailed or anything, nobody tried. And then another one is the journalist Rilwan. He disappeared, and there had been footage, some kinds of course, private people given footage of how the process of disappearance, how the initial stages of disappearance started. He was picked up by somebody in Male, taken to Hulumale, the next island, and so on. And apparently his body had been dismembered. This part, I'm not sure, I haven't verified, according to many articles and many sayings. Some people have seen it. Then another one, Yamin Rashid, the journalist. People haven't forgotten, and particularly the families of those have not forgotten the promise that President Solih made. And of course, it's going to be a major topic that when it comes to what he had not fulfilled will come. And finally, I think what we can also say that the Indian, so-called the Indian problem had not been solved. But he never promised, of course, to solve the Indian problem. But it is a problem because there had been all kinds of, I mentioned this a little earlier, all kinds of accusations against the government, to the extent that the Maldives is now, in fact, under India. Indians have come, Indians are traveling, Indians are doing this, Indians are doing that, without obeying any rules. Of course, some of it have no proof, of course. But these are the things, I think, it's standing, I wouldn't even call it aloof, but being very sure of what India is doing. After all, India is a dangerous country. Okay, it's our neighbor, always helped, it's our big brother in South Asia, etc., etc. But India is clever, India is large, India is huge, India is powerful, India is richer than Maldives. So I think people feel that government has to be stronger with India. Government has to be more alert with India. The government has to know, has to not act as stupid, which they think the public thinks sometimes it's doing with regard to Indian issues. And so those are the things that I think he had not fulfilled, though he needs to pay attention to fulfilling if he comes into power again.
That brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you for your time, Dr. Didi.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to participate. I hope people learned something about the Maldives, and all the best to your broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You were listening to South Asia Chat. You can learn more about our work by visiting us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also get updates on our research and publications through social media. You can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.